And welcome into This Life Matters. I am one of your hosts, Andrew Morgan, right alongside professional licensed counselor and amongst a lot of other things that she is. This is GG. How are you doing today, GG?
I'm great because the sun's shining. It's not raining. I know it's been raining up where you are, but you know, when we have a nice day, that's the temperature is just perfect and there's not lots of wind and the sun's shining, and it reminds me that, okay, we're going to have spring.
Yeah. That's one of the funny things about it, of like this time of the year. It's raining a little bit, like it does rain here, but it rains here almost every day. But we've had a lot of very clear, beautiful days and everything is blooming. And, there's multiple colors. So like just in my neighborhood alone, there's like multiple dogwood trees and other small little things. And then there's always the large alpines and, like the larger trees. But seeing like, just the ground is just littered with these pink and white petals. It almost makes you feel like you're royalty just walking down the street, because it's like some sort of flower bearer just came before you. It's really, I love this time of the year. I don't like the allergies, but I love this time of the year. It wakes something up in me allergy wise. But yes, this is one of the more beautiful times of the year. Absolutely. And today we're we're continuing our series of cultural competency. And last week we talked about, we took a little page from the headlines and we took advantage of talking about, our relationship with loving our Asian brothers and sisters. And I want to, before we go over into our next, preview what our next topic is for today, I want to say continue the conversations and really press for some hard conversations around reconciliation with your brothers and sisters, because it's not a hot button topic anymore. There was a shooting at in a grocery store and a few other things that have happened in the political system this week. And all of a sudden, Asian lives, like Stop Asian Hate is a little bit different of a conversation. And I just want to say, we want you to continue that conversation and keep pushing to help people in those communities who need their voices heard. But as for right now, this week, GG has a brilliant topic that I feel like it actually kind of like, if you listen to last week's, one of the things that I had brought up really feeds in like how I'm dealing and coping with helping to stop Asian hate. But I had to go back to, some of the battlegrounds, some of those type of places. So I don't want to stumble all over it. Let's let GG tell us what we're going to talk about this week.
Well, last time, Andrew, as he introduced it, we did talk about the Asian community, and we talked about our perceptions of others, the other, as people are now calling it, the other. And we've talked about our worldview and how we formed that. We're going to get into that a little bit more today, and how we formed our perceptions of other people, of others, and besides people, just lots of other things. And some of that is informed a lot by where we grew up and how we grew up and the families that we grew up in. And those things have helped form our worldview. And so I'm kind of calling this episode Backgrounds and Battlegrounds, because our backgrounds sometimes turn into our battlegrounds and the battlefields in our lives. Today, we're kind of focusing a little bit more on the addictions that we have as far as cultural competency goes. And we're not just talking here. This is a broader topic than trying to deal with your own or someone else's addiction to alcohol or drugs. There's many addictions that we can have in our lives. And I'd like for you to kind of stop and have an open mind right now and really do some self-searching about the areas of our lives that we may be addicted to. What part of our lives there might be a part in our lives that we are addicted to. So I want to kind of mention some of these and see if they resonate with anybody. And if you think of some other things and you want to comment on it, we're not going to assume that it's your addiction. We're just going to assume that you've thought of some other ways that we can do addictions in our lives. So I've kind of just jotted down a few besides drugs and alcohol and sex. I mean, those are like the top three that people really talk about.
Right.
But I thought about some other things. Are we addicted to, and then put in the blank, behaviors, different behaviors that we have, routines. But how about our thoughts, our feelings, drama? Are we addicted to drama in our life? Lying? How about money? Addicted to money, making money, spending money, buying things, saving money? How about shallowness? Shallow discussions or deep discussions. The opposite could be true. People pleasing. Are we addicted to people pleasing? How about trouble? Having trouble, thinking life is trouble, creating drama, those things. How about social circles? Being addicted to belonging to whatever, whether it's a social circle and being included in something, or being the head of something, or taking charge, being in control. Those are some of the, just off the top of my head, I thought about that people, human beings, become addicted to. Andrew, what do you think about some of these things that I've mentioned?
I think with all of them, I 100% agree with all that you had on there. These, I think for me, a lot of these things, it's about identifying learning how to identify addiction. And majority of these can go as an addiction. In my life, I've noticed I would let them go as an addiction because I just framed them outside of the window of addiction by framing addiction as like, well, it's not the big three, like you had mentioned earlier. It's not sex, drugs, or alcohol, or, all these other things that have laws or religion or just society in general, frowns upon. And so the other trap that I've had for it is, if it's not harming someone else, it's fine. If it's just me, I'm good. And so I had to start to learn how to identify addiction a little bit differently. And one of the ways that I had realized was during the political season, because that's one that I would add to that list. Like as far as an exterior addiction, like being addicted to politics. But what was the root reason I was addicted to, watching this? It was a desire to control the narrative and wanting to win and wanting to be a part of, these other deeper, it was something deeper within me. I wanted my team to win. And it was the same thing. And so in politics, I realized, okay, I was really close in my life. I was close to, nationalism, not because it was really a part of my background, but because it was a part of my rooting interest. And that rooting interest kept me addicted to coming back and being fed. Like I needed to feed this thought, like in order to, bring some validity to this point that I've made. And I realized, okay, I'm addicted to wanting to be right. I want to control the narrative. And that's when I started to be able to identify, once I started being honest with myself. And it always came back to something small and minuscule. But that's kind of like my take on it. What do you think? And I see you smiling. What do you got churning?
Well, I think that's right. And I've written down another one that I thought of, sports.
Yo. Yeah.
So, let's break this down. All these things in themselves maybe aren't bad.
Right.
if there's a continuum here of everything, and we're talking about a balance of not letting it take over in our life, or it takes over to the detriment of ourself, our health, our loved ones, our value system. It goes back always. We're always going back to our value system here. I haven't mentioned boundaries yet, but it's those things that are out of balance that cause us harm and others harm. And so that addiction, if it's, well, there's people that are set and determined to take away certain rights from other people. Is that an addiction with them? I would say it probably is, if it's harming other people. But they don't see it that way. They're not seeing it that way. I mean, currently today and yesterday or last week, it's about voting rights and things coming down the pike. And I look at that as an addiction of some people being raised up and other people being pushed down.
Yeah. It's addiction to power. And that addiction to power always comes back to not addressing certain fears. Fear. And for me, I noticed there's a fear of not being in control. And that is one of the most abusive traits that we can have, is when we're not free to be fluent in a relationship, whether it's relationship with society as a whole or interpersonal, to be able to be fluid enough to just say, hey, this can happen, within safe boundaries, but to try to control and keep control over, hey, they say, you should do this, you should vote this way. I feel like, we've talked about this, when there is voter suppression things passed, we know that that's about keeping minorities and people of color in check and keeping them away from systems of power. We know that when someone says, they're anti-abortion, it has in 90% of the time, and we can get in trouble for this, I don't care. It's never about the Bible for those people. It's about controlling women's bodies. It's about keeping patriarchy at the forefront so that the power, because there's a power struggle in some people's mind. And that goes back to their battleground. They were taught men are hunters and providers, and they should only behave and act in this particular way. And they are subconsciously, in a lot of cases, trying not to disappoint dad or granddad or someone from the great generation or someone else. Instead of being fair, being honest, and taking a look, they're trying to gain control over people and over things. And that's a little bit off the top, a little bit, a rabbit trailed a little bit there, but that's the way I kind of just but when are we going to be honest enough to even confront? Sometimes we confront that exterior. We argue the abortion issue, or we argue the gun control issue or whatever, instead of what are you really trying to do here? And I think that's it's hard to go back to that background sometimes, especially if that background is full of trauma, So
yes, some people do their family trees.
Yeah.
And they look at the people and where they were born and where they died. Well, in counseling or in life, doesn't have to be in counseling, but there's something called a genogram. A genogram is different, and it's very helpful because a genogram looks like a family tree to begin with, but then you start plugging in different things like abuse. We plug in abuse issues, and if you look at that, you can see a generational down the line, generational abuse. And alcoholism is another one. If there's, you look at certain people's denominations or religions, but especially the like a Christianity, say, for instance, since we're in America, and that's probably one I'll talk about first, and the one I know about more because I don't know, frankly,
Right.
about different sects of some other religions. Okay, I'll just state that right away. But it can apply to any type of religion. So in America, for instance, or other countries that espouse Christianity, there's different denominations. And if you look at the family tree in the genogram of the denomination of these people, and you look at the belief system of those denominations, that generally comes down the family line too. Then you look at, were they what kind of professions did they have?
Right.
What kind of education did they have? Did they live in large cities, small cities? What was their health? So you start to get a bigger picture about background. And then also you plug in like the political parties that they may have belonged to. Any information that you have about that, you can plug that in. And it's hard, unless you have pictures and you have family stories, it's hard to go back several generations. And let's just face it, in your
Right.
in your race, coming from possibly, there are people that are not from, didn't that are Black that did not come over from Africa. There are those. There are that they can follow their family trees a little bit farther back, and especially if there is someone that married into with a white person, that tree part can be followed back. But in your family, I don't know how far back you can go and do this. So that is an interesting thing to do if you want to delve more into real backgrounds. But looking at your family of origin that you came from will give you a lot of clues as to what they did for a living, who their employees were, what religion they were, what you heard in the home, what kind of language, not only did you learn English or Spanish or French, how did they language, which is what kind of words did they use? And so when we look at all these, it gives us a good rounded idea about background. And then we can move forward to see how that informed us and how that plays into our daily lives and whether these things have become battlegrounds for us or not.
Yeah. I noticed that when I did a lot of work with veterans, you could go generations and generations back, and it was always my dad was in a war, my dad and my grandpa was in a war.
Mm-hmm.
And it helps you realize that this young country has been at war since its inception. Like we've had very few decades that we can say there was no war whatsoever. And that informs the way that a person thinks and the way that they act, and how they react. And so if like you pointed out with my background, when people say things like, this is to help us kind of understand cultural competency. When you know your own background, you have to sit sometimes with a trauma that you didn't, that you inherit, so I remember doing this with my in my family therapy session. And there was multiple things that came up in recent history that were related to direct, traumas that no family should have to undergo. Right. But then there was this larger generational issue to where, you could only get to the 1800s and then you didn't count as a human. You get to a certain point where it was just like, this is such and such Morgan's property. And where he purchased us from and bartered us from or stole us from, we don't know, And so from there, you deal with it. And that's an internal soul sadness. That's not a clinical word, but that's just how it feels when your soul is just, people can sing it as well with your soul. But when you inherit certain issues, it's not always well. And it doesn't always feel well, at least, And I think that those are the type of things that when people say, well, why do they have to protest and say Black Lives Matter? Because when you connect in and you see such a blank space, you sometimes want to say, hey, do I matter to you? I need you to say I matter. And it's not about political rhetoric and all these other things that it's made. I can't speak for everyone who says that term, but I'm giving more explanation to it because I know people who come to us want to be taught, but a lot of what you see panning out in the streets, the support for the Asian community, this has been like we discussed part of this, but this was a part of comic book propaganda for years to be anti-Asian. This has been ingrained in our country. Xenophobia has been ingrained in is a root problem. And it's, the minority deal is something that we deal with, where before, people who now identify as white, when they first came to this country, identified as Irish or Italian or Jewish. And there's traumas there. Because when they came, it wasn't romantic. We tell the stories now, like Gangs of New York, as this, fair breeding ground. But the truth of the matter is there's a lot of family traumas, a lot of the history of mistreatment coming into America. And there's slurs related to each person's, ethnicity. And now majority of those can get lumped into white. And so you can kind of ignore it. But the truth of the matter is it will inform how you deal and how you talk to people, especially when the immigration story is one that is part of America's creed, that you come here and you work hard and everything works out, but you've got to work hard because you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And as MLK pointed out, and other people have said articulately, the slave didn't have a bootstrap, so, you coming over here with your pair of boots. So each person is different. So being patient with each person as you relate with each person and understanding their background, sometimes it's good for you to, like, at least in your own mind's eye, take a look at someone else's if you're not intimately invited into the space of looking at someone else's. At least have enough information about the society you live in. Inform your soul and inform your heart to want to love. And part of what, doing that and taking honest looks, that's where the real battleground needs to be. Like, this is how we figure out, like, not, but that's kind of my take on what you were saying. And like in the first thought that I kind of had as it relates to cultural competency.
When I just thinking about myself when I was growing up, I mean, we were born into these families and children that whatever our family is normal to them. I mean, that's what we consider normal.
Yeah.
Whether it's behavior, language, thoughts, how we learn what is a mother, what's a father, what's a grandparent, is the world safe, is it not? All those things we take in without anybody telling us in words, but we absorb all that. And if no one talks to us about issues like this, then that we're talking about today, then we don't have the knowledge as a child.
Yeah.
So it really informs those deep beliefs that people have. And it takes a lot for us to figure that out, whether it's that we want to believe those things or not believe those things, whether we think based on experience and education and talking to people that it's was right or wrong in our own eyes. And sometimes people don't make the shift because it was their family or their church that taught them certain things.
Yeah.
But those people got to decide what they were going to think and believe too. And so do you. So do I. So does Andrew. We all get to make a decision once we reach a certain age, and that changes over time. I mean, I've said before that I grew up in a certain denomination, and only 2.5 years ago did I change to a completely different type of worship and denomination and history of the church and all that. And I look back and I think, well, I didn't like it 40 years ago, but why did I just stay there? Why did I just keep doing this? Or why? I don't know.
You know, I'm going to say something that I think a lot of people need to hear and need to grapple with. It's okay to be wrong. Your church is wrong sometimes. Your religion is wrong sometimes. But outside of those exteriors of whether mom, dad, church, pastor, whoever is wrong, it's okay for you to be wrong. And I think we are so scared to be wrong that we will double down in abuse and stay in a cycle of hatred and abuse and harmful behavior to our very being in the context of how we were made. We will stay in these emotionally abusive situations that don't care about the context of who we are and how we're made. And we'll do it just for survival's sake or not to deal with it. But overall, sometimes the power to walk away may be addressed with the little bag that says, hey, I was wrong about that relationship. I was wrong about that marriage. I was wrong about that, that job that I took. I was wrong about, that religion that I believed in for so long, or that denomination, and move on. It's okay. It's okay to admit you were wrong, but it's hard. It's hard for us to do that.
And as we can evolve as people, and as we do that with more clearly, I know I say this all the time, but reading, listening, education, thought processes, meditation, all of these things that are out there for us, that's when we start maybe changing our mind about some things that we thought might be true, but there was that nagging something underneath, and we didn't quite know what it was, maybe. And then we finally figure it out. Okay, then we need to do something about it. So getting back to these things that inform us and possible addictions that we have, religion is on this list, definitely. And so I'd like to encourage you to think about, what in my life am I currently doing or thinking that maybe is a little bit out of the realm of being balanced? And maybe you want to do something about it, or maybe you don't. I'm just saying, just to think about it and see if there's any kind of changes that you might think are appropriate to make in whatever area it is. And it could be about racial relations. It could be about even things like getting a thought, oh, I should send a card to so-and-so, or I wonder if I should take a meal to so-and-so, but we don't ever do it. And then we look back and say, oh, I wish I had. Or you get a thought about, oh, I need to call somebody. That is some kind of a intuition. I'll call it intuition, because that's what I believe, that we put intentions out to the universe and they come back to us. But it's this intuition that we get a thought and then we don't act on it. And then we find out later it's too late to do it. So, and that happens to me, all the time. So this week I was challenged by something I heard to, if I got a thought that was about doing something maybe for someone else, or something along that line, just to do that, to go ahead and do it. And I did it. And I have another one brewing that I've got now that I know I want to do. So, I don't know where that comes in with addictions, but I think it would be that if I would not do it, I'd be addicted really to not even stepping out and doing something that I thought I ought to do.
Yeah. Some you said reminded me of one of my favorite sayings, is that the opportunity of a lifetime can only exist within the lifetime of the opportunity. And when you really process what that means, it's like live your life to the fullest. You might as well, you know, you have to take advantage of those outs that you have to get
Mhm.
free. I'll use myself for example. I'm one of those people who you watched my journey from for about 5 years there, where I lost maybe a total of 50 pounds or so. And it was because there was an opportunity. And within that lifetime of that opportunity, I was blessed with the ability to get up twice a day and go to the gym because it was a part of my job. I was ate out of a cafeteria that gave me only the type of food that I needed. I could say only give me chicken breast or tuna today or whatever it was. That was the lifetime of that opportunity. That lifestyle did not work for me outside of that opportunity, outside of that job. And I found that that discipline, that support wasn't there anymore. And I was blessed to have taken advantage of it within my lifetime. um, you never know where you're going to be tomorrow. And if you are wanting to evolve and you have people willing and ready to be a part of your life and help you, take advantage of some of those opportunities to evolve and to, especially when people want to help. And, like if it's time if people are calling you to the battleground, they're saying like, hey, let's hash this out. Let's do the hard work. Let's do the dirty work together. It's better to do the dirty work with someone in a safe place, whether it's through therapy, whether it's through, like group therapy or dealing with someone in a very intimate, safe space that you feel safe with is in an inner circle. Either way it goes, those are safe places, and you might as well battle it out with them and there. Um, and overcome some of those things, or at least come to the medium of what they call it. We agree to disagree, you know, but at least know and be informed by why your situation is the way it is. Because oftentimes, man, in life, we will lose out. And as it relates to addiction, I've seen a ton of it, working where I worked. A ton of people would come in and they would literally say, I don't know how I got here. And it took them all of 9 months to unpack why they got there, get beyond some of the reasons as to why, and actually then apply the discipline to do the work to move beyond that space because they recognized that that was an unhealthy space to be in. So just getting clean off drugs was never the issue. If the physical thing disappears, you'll be fine. Your body will catch up. It's the addictive mindset. um, we had related it back to patterns of behavior, of control. Even with elections, going against one particular group, the other group then reacts because they have they want more power. They want power back. It's a power dynamic, and no one's addressing the real issue, because the real issue, if you start talking about it, it might actually solve something. Sometimes the pain that we live in and the things that we're going through can appear to be lucrative. It can appear to be something that benefits us. That comfort is not always beneficial. Sometimes yeah, go ahead.
When you talked about the pain, I was thinking about that, or as you were talking, and then you mentioned pain and the addiction process. Yeah, it comes from a place of hurt. So just figuring out where that hurt it is key in addressing that, and getting some help around that issue. However, it can be even through podcasts like ours. It can be through self-help podcasts, things like that. NPR has a great podcast called Life Kit, KIT. So there's lots of ways that you can get help. But people that have insurance, generally you can afford to go to a therapist, or if you can't, there's ways to get to do that. So I would encourage everybody to try to look at some of the ways in your life that you think you would like to have a little bit of change for some improvement, and address those things.
All right. Well, folks, that's our time for this week. we're just kind of just hitting the iceberg with these conversations around cultural competency and different ways that we're going to come at you with these conversations. Please like, share with a friend. This podcast is available now in audio form, so you'll be able to hear this on Anchor, as well as Spotify and Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. I believe it's also on there, as well as you can watch this where you're watching it right now, whether it's on YouTube or whether you're watching it on Facebook. Either way it goes, we're bringing you this podcast. We're bringing you this Life Matters because we have to take advantage of the factor that we have air, in our lungs, we have life, and we have, life to share with one another and love to give. And we just want to give each other love and give you love. So, because love ultimately overcomes hate. Because you know what I like to say, hate can't drive out hate. Only love can do that. And we love you for listening. We thank you so much for listening to This Life Matters. And GG,
life begins to end the day we become silent about things that matter. Martin Luther King. And we will see you next week on This Life Matters.